So months ago, I had made the decision that given the costs and the logistics involved, I was not going to do something, even though I really wanted to do it. I mean, we all have to make choices, right? So on Wednesday at about noon, I looked at my wife and I asked, I prefaced it by saying this, which is maybe not a great idea. I said, I'm going to say something, and you can either tell me to go ahead and do it, or you can say, that's crazy, don't ever do that. And I'll probably do whatever you say. Probably, So I said, I really want to go see the University of Houston Cougars play basketball tonight, but it's in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is a 3.5-hour drive from our house. And, come back, and the kids have to go to school the next day, and I know you have stuff to do, so I would have to take all of them, and I'm happy to take all of them, but they would be out till like 1 a.m., the whole deal. And she said, well, you should do it, right? Which was really lovely to hear. So I bought tickets and a parking pass online. I packed up the 3 boys in the van. We drove 3+ hours to Morgantown to watch my beloved alma mater's men's basketball team play against West Virginia University. It was fantastic. They won 63-49. Between the time I wrote this and I'm giving this to you now, they lost last night, so that's tempering my emotions a little bit about it, but that's beside the point. Wednesday was lovely. There were probably 7,000 enthusiastic Mountaineer fans and 50 Houston fans, maybe. Little dots of red and a sea of yellow. It was interesting. We enjoyed the game. I had a lovely conversation with some West Virginia fans out in the parking lot while we were waiting for traffic to clear. We packed up, got in the van, stopped at Sheetz for some food, and drove 3 hours back home. And we got home just after 1 a.m. And I look at it and I think that does seem silly. I mean, that's a lot of driving for an event that I could have watched on TV. And part of my calculus was that ticket prices had dropped a lot because West Virginia lost a few games in the last few weeks, so people are trying to get rid of their tickets, I guess. But even with that, it wasn't exactly cheap for a one-day event, right? It's not for the 4 of us. But that Wednesday at noon, as I was thinking about doing this, I just had a feeling in the pit of my stomach that if I didn't do this, I was gonna feel bad about not having done it, right? And I think part of that is that we have to embrace joy. Especially now. My Cougars, being based in Houston, Texas, do not play out here on the East Coast much as Morgantown, West Virginia counts as the East Coast anyway. It was drivable. The football team hasn't played anywhere near here since the 2021 game at Temple, which I went to, even though it was raining and miserable. The men's basketball team hadn't been out here since playing at Virginia some 2 years ago. And I felt that in my gut, I just didn't want to miss that. And if you're not into sports, which is fine, much less college basketball, which is its own little niche, you might imagine your favorite musician is out on tour and has a stop in Philly or Baltimore, but only the one stop, and they won't be back for a couple of years, if ever. And so my point, once again, is sharing this with you is severalfold. One, go Cougs. Tough road game, we won, really helped cement our resume for the NCAA tournament in a couple of months. But 2, as I said earlier, this is a time to embrace joy when it's there to be embraced. I've always thought that joy is one of the companions of love, which is my primary topic today. And then 3, even in the midst of the most challenging of times, we have to do things that give us life. Whatever that is for you. So to spend a couple $100 to go to an event up in West Virginia, that was worth it because I feel like it gave me some life this week, and I needed that. We are, as Unitarian Universalists, putting love at the center of all we do. 1, I think it's the only guiding metric that makes any sense to me, ultimately. Because trying to figure out what's right, well, that's a really difficult thing. Knowing what's best for me, well, that's not as difficult, but I'm not sure it's a metric that helps the world necessarily. Though I do have to care for myself, as I evidenced by going to a basketball game this week. But I find doing what is loving, and not loving in a shallow or small sense, but loving in a justice-filled, wanting the best for someone in our relationship, and our relationship in the larger community sort of way, is the most valuable metric for me to know what should be done. It's not perfect. It makes mistakes. But as I said last week, we as Unitarian Universalists and as people of conscience, people who are seeking justice, we have a call and a responsibility to love. To love those around us, sure, but also especially to love those different from us. To love those who are far away. Because that's the only way that we build beloved community, ultimately. Now, near and around us, that means a lot of things, but one of the things it means welcoming people into our community and our hearts and our homes. So as we welcome our new members today, even some of whom who have been here for a while, I wanted to talk about this idea that we are embodying love. We are called to welcome in new people to our community and our lives. It's that simple. So when I hear some people in our country and our world saying that some people don't deserve empathy or respect, I think about what we believe here. And when I hear that perhaps our Constitution doesn't apply to certain people or to certain rules, I think not just that that's wrong, but also I think about our covenant as a congregation, which applies to all of us and which we try to live up to in all we do. Not that we're perfect, and when I say we are not perfect, I mean both us here in this room and on Zoom, and us, all of humanity. And to that point, I wanted to lift up some news from this week. You may have missed this because it was in an interview that I only saw secondhand. I just want to point out, this is not some abstract idea. It's a very real thing in our country. So I'll do something that I don't like to do, but I'm going to quote J.D. Vance, because he said something that just made my jaw drop this week. So I'll start with the quote and then get back to it. He said, and I quote, "There's this old school, and I think it's a very Christian concept, by the way, that you love your family, and then you love your neighbor, and then you love your community, and then you love your fellow citizens and your own country, and then after that, you can focus and prioritize the rest of the world." He went on to point out that in his opinion, that's the end of the quote, he went on to point out in his opinion that the left, in his words, has inverted this idea and only wants to care about people in faraway places. I just want to be really clear that it's a lovely little sentiment as you read it. What he says, it seems to make sense, and it's just total crap. Everything he said is wrong, harmful, and more than that, it's a really terrible misunderstanding of some pretty core and basic Christian theology. It's just the most, I can't imagine anyone having actually read Scripture, especially what Jesus said, and thinking that that's what you should be doing. The idea that you can't love or have empathy for anyone outside of the orbit of your own orbit until you perfectly love all of those around you, it's contradicted by everything in our world, and again, contradicted directly by Scripture. It's the sort of isolation that led to things like both world wars. It's an idea that leads to smallness of spirit and pettiness of outlook. It's code, and barely code at this point, for the idea that I only have to care about myself. It's an outlook that hurts all of us because it denies the very interdependence that is core to who we are. When Jesus asked, "Who is your neighbor?" he was attempting to widen the scope of your empathy, not narrow it. I think he's quoting Augustine incredibly poorly, by the way. Anyway, we'll get into Augustine some other day. But this is not who we are as Unitarian Universalists or how we see the world. In the words of our new values, we lift up, and I quote, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity with love at the center. And so we reject the politics that J.D. Vance represents, the politics that seeks to divide us. Instead, we lift up our shared humanity as foundational. And not to get too pragmatic about this, but in an economy that is linked all around the world, I have to care about people who are far away from me, because whether I do or not, I'm affecting their lives, and they're affecting mine. Now, this doesn't mean even in our nice little like-minded community that things are always joyful or easy. In fact, our values often lead us to the opposite, especially when we're actually following them well, it seems. They lead us to situations that challenge us, that force us to grow and learn, that lead us headlong into things that are difficult. And if it's not obvious at this point, I'm just going to say it out loud. This is one of those times as a nation and world that is going to be difficult. The corresponding reality to those challenges, though, is the support and love of a community to be with us. The idea that none of us ever need be truly alone, that anything we face together, and we can overcome. And my mini message of this sermon is to remember to embrace joy. Because we're not going to fix all the problems of the world in a day or a week or even a year. And if we don't feed our own souls in the meantime, we run the risk of lessening ourselves in the process. So find joy wherever that is for you. Embrace it. Don't let go. But also remember to pass it on to others, because you don't have to let go of it in order to give it to someone else too. So, friends, I want to welcome once again our new members, but also everyone here, whether you are here for the first time or the 1001st. This is a congregation where we place love at the center of everything we do. A place where you are welcome in the fullness of who you are, but also challenged and invited to deepen your spirit and transform our world. We're glad you're here, and go Cougs.